Welcome to the RGLT Economics. Today I want to talk about 3 reasons why I think China is not on course to become a developed country. In fact, I think the level of wealth and prosperity and living standards that the Chinese people can enjoy will be limited by these 3 factors. And any improvement above that requires one or all of these to be removed. And these 3 factors are: number 1, a lack of wealth accumulation; 2, a lack of creativity; and 3, a lack of institutions. So let's start with wealth accumulation. This actually is what has prompted me to make today's recording. You see, currently I'm staying at my parents' old apartment, and in here there used to be a lot of trees. They planted a lot of trees 30 years ago, right? But over the years, every time they want to make some renovations, they cut some of the trees down. And this morning, they went further to cut everything down. And today also, as they were cutting here and there, I have to move my car. So I went out. I went to a park, and on the way back, they were starting to make repairs, quote unquote repairs, on a road which was actually perfectly fine. In fact, the road is so good that I think you can easily drive double the speed limit there. In fact, higher than than you can on the motorway, because it's just absolutely fine, absolutely smooth. But they want to do it. Now, why do you think that they want to do this? Because they want to create GDPs. That's as simple as that. They want economic activities. If they cannot accumulate wealth, if they can't build wealth, at least they can destroy something and build it again. That's what they are doing. Now, that, I think, is very poor understanding of how capitalism functions. They don't understand that wealth needs to be accumulated bit by bit, right? But they think that as long as every year I have good GDP numbers, at the end I'll be rich. That's not true, because you see, in the beginning, let's say you have one road and a certain set of resources. Bulldozing this road, you have no road and less resources, because you use some resources to destroy it. And then you build this road again, but in the meantime, in the process, you use more resources, and now you have only a road as before. So you have no more road, but less resources. That is, with these GDPs over the years, a lot of them is not going into the accumulation of wealth, but rather it's building something that is later on torn down and rebuilt. So you have nothing left from your previous year's GDPs. That's why, one of the reasons why you never get beyond building this road, right? Of course, I'm talking about road, but this applies to a lot of the business practices as well. In China, business is usually about one shot. They make as much money as possible, then pack up. The boss will migrate to the United States, buy a big house in some of the hot zones where there are a lot of Chinese people who accumulate. And that's basically their plan. And what's left behind, pollution, abandoned factories, and laid off workers. So every year in, year out, governments, local authorities are trying to attract new investments, new factories. Nothing lasts. You build something and you destroy it. You build something, you destroy it. And in the process, some people make a little money, they bring it to the United States, but there is no wealth accumulation locally. And that is why China remains poor. right? Of course, on paper, it is not so poor, and it's certainly not as poor as it was before. Not as poor, certainly richer, wealthier than when I was young, very young. But at the same time, I need to point out that when I was young, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we had almost no pollution. I could see the sky, and the sky was blue. There were clouds, and nowadays, one day in 10, you can see the clear sky. One day in 10, you could see clear clouds, and the rest of the days, dust storm, sandstorm, P2.5 storm, PM2.5 storm. That's all you get, and that is not how you build wealth. That is how you destroy wealth. That is how you destroy the standard of living of your people. But the authority does not understand this. They only understand GDP, and this simplistic thinking is what is largely underlying the woes that China's economy has been experiencing. There are a lot of wrong decisions on the strategic level. Number one. Number two, there is a lack of creativity. Now, at this point, a lot of people will disagree with me, and they point to a lot of things that Chinese people created in history, and a lot of things that Chinese people of Chinese origin created, invented abroad. A lot of Chinese Americans are very active in the semiconductors sector in the United States, for example. I'm not saying that Chinese people are inherently uncreative. What I'm saying is that the education system and the society, the institutions are constructed in such a way that there is a right answer. There's a right answer and there's a wrong answer. And always when you try to create something, when you try to innovate, you fall into part of the wrong answers, and you are eliminated. You are not authorized to move forward, and there are a lot of institutional checks that makes it very difficult for people who are creative and who want to innovate to actually move ahead in this. And at the same time, I think in my previous podcast, I talk about in France, where there is a lack of long-term commitment to long-term innovation that does not yield immediate returns. Well, in China, people are obsessed with short-term income, short-term profits. They are obsessed with money, indeed. So it's very difficult for people to really commit to research. I want to say that I am also like this, right? I find it very difficult to keep my focus on the same task that perhaps is very complex, that to analyze it, to understand it fully over years, only to produce something that perhaps will be marketable, perhaps will not be marketable, and even if it's marketable, perhaps can be easily imitated, copied by a competitor, and in the end, perhaps will not yield me the correct, or let's say the correct pecuniary reward. So that's the lack of creativity. And number three, there is also a lack of institutions. And when we talk about institutions here, I'm not talking about political systems. There are always political systems in every country, including an authoritarian dictatorship. Right? What I'm saying is, and I'm not saying that China is as that, right? What I'm saying is that there is a lack of institutions that go beyond the simple political system. A lack of institutions that governs, that protects people's rights, that protects people's properties, that protects justice. Instead, it is still dominated by the political system which is dominated by personalities. And so that's the thing. You see, on the one hand, you have personalities. On the other hand, you have institutions. With the former, the problem is that there are a lot of variances depending on who is in charge, and that is partly to blame for the disparities in the level and speed of development across the regions in China. Some regions are simply governed better, while others are worse. Some regions respect private property better, while others do not. In fact, some local officials in certain regions have been reviewed to be essentially racketeers, or perhaps, to put it bluntly, mafiazos, right? And let's say I have some doubts, but not really much doubt. I have little doubt that these officials still exist, and they are perhaps still quite prevalent. And so if there is a very strong institution that governs over people, right, law above people, then there will not be this problem. I mean, a weaker version of this problem. But now it's people above law. They say that under the law everyone is equal, but hey, it certainly is not like that. Because there is still a weak institution. So a lot of efforts needs to be put into these. So finally, let's talk about, I want to talk about what I think can do, or can take a place. About creativity, I think that we can forget about it. I don't think the Chinese education system can change overnight. And the people who are parents, they will teach their children the way that they've been taught. So it's impossible to reclaim creativity in this society within 2 decades. This needs to be a dedicated work over generations to change to bring back creativity in this society. But I think it's time to start. Can we do it? I don't see it being done now. But yeah, well, it takes 2 generations, I think. And then there is the wealth accumulation. I think this is the first thing that I talk about. I think this is the one thing that can be done. All it needs to be and I think there are some signs that perhaps the central government in China is trying to shift the direction a little bit in this area, to focus less on GDP, but more on wealth accumulation and the standard of living. There needs to be a more complex way to assess the success of a society. It must not be simply how much money you make a year. That is a very crude and I think very crude way, and very how to say, what is the better word for it? Crude and I think it's an objectionable way to assess everything, to ascribe everything to give everything a monetary value. I think that's really bad. And even that, it's just a short-term money, not long-term wealth accumulation. And finally, the institutions. This will take the longest time. Due to some ideological things, I don't even want to go there, right? Because this will certainly be censored. It's not possible, in fact, currently, and perhaps in the decades or generations forward ahead, for there to be strong institutions. So this will always be a problem for China. Now, can China become a developed country? Yes, it can, but not in the near future. I think a lot of work needs to be done, but as long as there's no systematic way to accumulate wealth, but instead wealth is destroyed as they're created, China can have the highest GDP in the world and perhaps even very high per capita GDP in the world. But still people live in a lifestyle that is worse than people who live in societies with lower per capita GDP. And then there is creativity. As long as the society is not creative enough to innovate, to lead the world in terms of innovation, China cannot be the leader in technology. It always needs to copy ideas from elsewhere. And this basically impedes its development at some point. But I think perhaps a society can become somewhat developed, even though it is not leading technological innovation. And finally, about institutions. I think for a country to become really, as the US, as the Americans like to say, a beacon in the world in terms of leadership, it needs to be a society that respects law, respects personal property, respects personal freedom. And this, I think, is not the strong suit of China. All right, I guess let's not talk too much. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.